I saw back here. I saw another presentation.
We'll get started here in a few minutes. We'll try to get started close to on time. We'll wait a minute or two and see if we have a few people show up last minute. Chris, were they lining up on the street to get in?
There was a run in the fair that was a 5K. Now everybody just kind of stays.
I'm not used to doing that. Terrible.
That's what I thought.
Dave, you should ride your
Advanced range speed. There's one of these up there too. Yeah, but I'll try to. I mean, you can tell me to go ahead or hopefully I'm getting the right order. I put the picture before the right, which seemed like it makes sense, because I couldn't quite figure out what it was. Play it right here. Welcome everybody. This may be the first real day of spring, one of the first real days of spring, so there's lots of other things to be doing, but I really appreciate the fact that you've chosen to come and listen to this program. For those of you who don't know, I'm Dave Newhart, President of Yellow Springs Historical Society.
Yay!
and my fan club. And I pay her to do that. And we have, speaking of paying, if you are interested in joining and you haven't paid your 2018 dues, Peggy at the front table can take that anytime after the program. We'll have refreshments afterwards. A little bit about the background. You can't live in Yellow Springs over the last 6 months without reading about the discussion on the new school and the possibility of a tax levy and so forth. And our part as a historical society is not really to get involved in that discussion. There's obviously lots of different views and thoughts on that. But what we thought would be interesting, given all of the interest in the schools and the facilities, the physical facilities of the school, is to go back and take a look at what's come before, what the history of the school buildings and the school system here in Yellow Springs and Miami Township. And as we did that, we found some interesting things, at least interesting to me. One of the things we found out was that we have, for a small community, a rich history with our schools, and unusually, we have, except for the maybe very earliest era, we have representatives of all of the eras of school building throughout the history of Yellow Springs and Miami Township. And so that's interesting to see. As you'll see today, it's amazing how those structures have continued in use, in some cases for 150, 160 years after their original construction. The other thing I think we'll see about this that I learned that I didn't know really before is that as you look at those different styles of schools, you'll see that they were shaped by both state law at the time, just like things are today, and by trends in school construction, just like things are today. There were different fashions in educational systems or progress, and one of the things on the back table that you can take a look at if you didn't get a chance to beforehand is a book, Barnard's School Architecture book from 1855. This particular book belonged to the Ohio school system. It's marked Ohio School Library on it, but it has examples of what's new in pedagogy and what should be taken into account and the latest styles in building schools and school equipment. And that's from 1855. So nothing's new under the sun. It's just changed somewhat. We're also going to try to do this in a way we've really not done before. So you're going to have to give us a little slack on this till we see if we get it ironed out right, because each one of our board members took a different school or different era, and we'll be doing a presentation on the particular schools and era that they were assigned or chose. And so we'll be shifting back and forth. I'm going to try to keep the slides up, but whether I'm in the right place at the right time, it may not be perfect coordination. We'll see what we can do. But it ought to be fun, and we really encourage you, anybody who has any history with the Yellow Springs schools, no matter what period it is, and I don't think there are going to be too many that remember the one-room schoolhouses, but but just on the board we have a number of people who went to the Union School, for example, for a while, and there's some really interesting stories, and part of the reason for this meeting is to hear some of those stories. So as we do these little segments, there'll be a chance for you during those segments to bring up your own memories or your own thoughts or additions that you'd like to make. So we really encourage audience participation with that. And so, Chris, with where are we going to start? We're going to start at the beginning.
They want to turn the lights off so that this slide will show better.
I hope you all can hear me. I'm not used to public speaking, so I'll try to speak out as best I can. I have the great job of the one-room schoolhouses. I might need light.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's good. Can everybody see the slides? Okay. So my name is Chris Zerbuchen. Good afternoon. We'll be taking a chair tour of the one-room schoolhouses of Miami Township and Yellow Springs. We have 7 schools that still exist in Miami Township. So the one-room schoolhouse era depicts the most romantic, nostalgic era for our schools. So we'll start in the 1820s. And where's my, oh, there you are. Okay, we have the Miami Township schools were first, and then in the 1850s, the Yellow Springs School District started. Go ahead. The Second Continental Congress passed the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, and this really is the start of the one-room schoolhouses. My friends and I have done a lot of bicycle tours around Ohio and the Midwest, and we've always been amazed at how many schoolhouses, one-room schoolhouses, exist. The reason is planning. The development of this whole Northwest territory was planned as to the townships, how much space would be allowed. The townships were 36 square miles. There were 3 major provisions in the Northwest ordinance. One is that there would be no less than 3 states, no more than 5. Secondly, that there would be a 3-stage process for them to join the Union. And third, that there would be the Bill of Rights. In Section 14, Article 3, it reads, religion, morality, and knowledge being necessary to good government and the happiness of mankind, schools, and the means of education shall forever be encouraged. So early on in the planned development of the Northwest Territory, they had planned schools, and they had set aside area, it's called Section 16, for the support of schools, public schools. Our first school is the Bryan Road School. This is the one that goes on the road out toward the entrance to John Bryan Park. It's on the left-hand side of the road. This beautiful building is a brick building that was built in 1866. The first school building would have been a wooden frame building. Our census information in 1810 is when we start our census count. Greene County was founded in 1803. Unfortunately, in Ohio, in 1804, Ohio started passing the black laws, which edged away the civil rights of our black citizens, such as entering the state tax-free, establishing residency, and being able to vote. So those restrictions started in 1804. In 1820, our population almost doubled. And then when you look down here at 1830, our population in Greene County almost tripled in 20 years. In 1825, the Miami Township School District was established with 4 districts, and the Bryan Schoolhouse, the Bryan Road Schoolhouse, was District 2, also called the Central District. During the 1820s and the 1830s, this was the only schoolhouse that existed. The children from Yellow Springs had to go 3 miles north to go to the Bryan School. And at that time, there was only 1830s. Only the white children were listed, because in 1831, Ohio passed a law again restricting the African American children from attending public school. And then you see here how much the town has grown. In 1840, there were 100 pupils in the Bryan Road Schoolhouse. And now we changed from Greene County census to Miami Township census. This is the 1831 enumeration of the Miami Township, the Bryan Road school attendance. There were, let me flip to another page here, there were 19 families, 37 children, and of these families, these 5 families lived up in Clark County and attended the Bryan Road School. So population started growing in the frontier days.
What do the numerals represent?
I'm sorry?
The numerals next to the names, what does that represent?
You mean this here?
Yeah, the number next to
The
the name.
Allen Barnes family had 1 child.
Oh, that's cool.
James Anderson had 3. Adam Young had 4. At first it looks like 11.
Yeah.
Wow. No, but then when you started counting, I said, well, that's not 11. So that was 4. So that's the number of children that they had. And we have down here Widow Wilson. She had 2 kids. Go ahead. As David mentioned, there were books that were written on how the one-room schoolhouse should be laid out. Primarily, there was the 1 or 2 doors that were the main entry, rooms for their coats and lunch buckets, and then the seats, and there were 2 children per seat, with the instructor at the front, usually on a raised platform, so she could keep an eye on the kids. This is not any of our schools. This is something I grabbed off of the internet, but it typically shows the layout of a one-room schoolhouse. And the 2 student desks. In the book that Ruth Welch wrote about the Hyde Road School, she describes the school in the early days. The first building was a frame structure. There were no desks, tablets, or steel pens. In place of desks, there were shelves that were fastened to the walls, extending around 3 sides of the room, and long benches. Those were for the use of the older pupils. The little ones They used just the benches, and these were made smaller. Excuse me. The cost of the blackboard, the slate blackboard, was very prohibitive for the early schools. So they had a way of making them out of wood. The author in one of these books suggests that instead that the blackboards were too prohibitive in cost. So instead, a good smooth board were glued together, sanded, covered with wallpaper, painted with a mixture of lamp black, flower of emery, and spirit varnish. These would be framed and then ledged below for the chalk. And also in those books, there are recipes on how to make chalk. So they were very, very self-sufficient in the era. The basic plan for the one-room schoolhouses was a rectangular building with ceilings that were 13 feet high. The entrance would be wide doors, preferably double, to retain heat. There would be 2 latrines, one for the boys and one for the girls, and usually a shed for the wood or the coal. The windows were 3 to 4 on each side of the building, and they faced east and west for the best light. The windows were 6 feet tall and 3 feet wide to admit air and light. Now we go to our first Yellow Spring School. This is on Elm Street, and this still exists. Excuse me. The 1845, this is when this building was built, and had, the schools were multi-uses. There was, the church were using it as well as the schools. In 1858, and the Yellow Springs District was created. And the Elm Street School was the primary school of the district. I apologize. In 1927, this building then became a nursery school for the African American community. We have a history from Della Miller, which would have been probably in the 1870s, and she talks about the Elm Street School. Let me take a drink first. My first teacher at this school was Miss Maggie McWork, a maiden lady of rather advanced years, and much too old for little folks. She had one method of punishment for any kind of offense: a sharp rap of her ever-present lead pencil on the fingers of the offender. She rapped mine once, and I never forgave her. I had no idea whatever I had done to offend. I was glad when I was promoted to the next grade, but alas for me, Miss McWork was promoted as well. Poor Della. Then we go on to the next school, which is the Beehive School, which was built in 1848. This is the District 4 school. And you see that they've added dormers to this building, and the doorway has been enclosed in the front entryway. This is the school that's on the left-hand side of the road as you drive from Fairborn to Yellow Springs. We assume that there were beehives, and that's why it got the name of Beehive. We don't know why it's called the Beehive School. Unfortunately, there was a stand of trees to the east of the school that they had to cut down because they were old and diseased. And the owner found out too late that the trees had grown around a metal ring that was put around the trees for the horses, so that they could hitch the horses up to this ring. Well, the trees grew over it, so they lost a couple chainsaws with that. Go ahead. This is the High Road School, which is District 5. And this was in the spring of 1911. We have a lot of stories, personal accounts about the Hyde Road School, both from Ruth Welch and from Della Miller. Ruth Welch writes that preaching services were also held here. The people bringing their dinners as the meetings lasted all day. It was then heavily wooded, so this is on Hyde Road, which is, I guess you all know where that is.
It's close to the entrance of Morris Bean.
Right. It's very near to the entrance of Morris Bean. It was then heavily wooded all about and only paths instead of roads. The Shawnee Indians were neighbors to these people. This is back in the 1830s. And their trail ran not a great distance away from the school along the Little Miami. Later on, a singing school was also an interesting feature of this school. A meeting held one night a week. One who was good in music was generally chosen the leader. In 1861, they started a literary society. So they would use the schools for readings, for public readings, for musicales, and for school. Della Miller has a story about the Hyde Road School. The school had all the earmarks of an old-time country school, from water pail and dipper to muddy-booted boys. Sometimes the big boys would stir up a skunk in the nearby woods. And the boys didn't seem to mind the odor at all, but that and certain stale odors in that building are things I can never forget. Boys always shelled out walnuts at nutting time and seemed to take a special pride displaying the ugly brown stains on their hands. You can just picture them rolling around chasing their classmates. Then the Hyde Road School was also called the Brown School and the Go School. The names were usually based on whoever was the property owner at the time of where the school was located. In 1850, the frame building was replaced by the existing brick building. This is the enumeration from 1882. This is 5 years prior to desegregation in Ohio. And we see a count here, again, 1882, we have the white youth and the colored youth. We have a total, the total page is not here. But we have then mixed, there's the total page. So we have 204 white and we had 29 black. And then there were some folks that lived in Cedarville and some folks that lived in Clark that sent their kids to the Miami Township School District. So it shows you that the locals had great amount of independence as to what they could do with their school systems and who they allowed. This is the map of the school District 4. This is the Beehive School, so this is Dayton Yellow Springs. And this would be the Confer School, which is on Enon, which David will talk about in a bit.
And then Hyde Road's down in the right corner, bottom right, that you just talked about.
Oh, thanks, thank you. Oh, yeah, you circled them already. Now we go into the 1850s. Yellow Springs has developed its own school system, and we start a building flurry of secondary schools. But first we visit the Rife School. This is on the border, this is east of Clifton, just about on the line of Miami Township and Cedarville Township. The line has probably changed over the years. When it was a wooden frame building, it might have been at a different location. But now this is the brick building that 1874 was when that brick building was built. And it's a lovely drive going out. So if we need a drive in the country or a bike ride out in the country, go find this school. And that would be
Kyle
District 3.
Road?
Kyle Road, where?
Yeah.
It's east of Clifton, so go across 72 and meander around in that area and you'll find it. And there's a Rife Road and a Kyle Road, and it's on Kyle.
Up the South River Road, right?
Yeah. So our first secondary school in Yellow Springs is the Woods School. It was named the Woods School because it was in the woods. It was an intermediary preparatory school and taught grammar, geography, reading, writing, and physiology. And it's, if you have never seen, I didn't know it existed until I did this project. It's on Park Place. It's a lovely home. This is probably the most well-known one-room schoolhouse that we have, and it's the South School. It was originally built as a high school for the Yellow Springs district. They taught reading, algebra, history, botany, and physiology. We still have the Miami Township, but this is the era that we start a new census with the Yellow Springs census information. And I think the year should be 1873 to 1887, the high school became the African American high school because the Union School opened in 1873, so the students would have gone to the Union School. So from 1871 to 87, or 1873, dates fluctuate, which is another thing I found doing this. You know, one book would have one date, another book would have another date. In 1887, then, Ohio passed the desegregation of the school systems. And there's a wonderful article in the Yellow Springs News of May of 2003 that recounts the desegregation of the school system. Under the leadership of Benjamin Arnett, a bishop of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, who served as a state representative from Greene County, the Ohio Unionist Party gradually began repealing the black laws. And in 1887, they repealed the last one, which would make racial segregation of public schools illegal. He was a powerful, large black man representing a white constituency. He got the repeal in February 1887, but he didn't stop there. He and his friend traveled around the area educating people about this new bill. His friend Jackson came to speak in Yellow Springs a month after the bill's passage, probably influencing Silas Wills to campaign throughout the village in support of the cause. Several years before, Wills had been denied the right to vote, legally given to blacks in 1870. And he bought property in the village from the proceeds of the lawsuit. Still devoting energy toward equal treatment of blacks, Wills, on the eve of the integration in town, went to all the black homes, urging parents to send their kids to the Union Schoolhouse. Many were afraid, but Silas kept saying that the time had come when a man had to stop being a Negro and had to become an American. Nobody can take your children through that door of that schoolhouse but you. If you don't do it now, you may never get the chance again. His son said that the first day of school, September 1887, his father stood at the door and counted the number of black students that came. All of them attended.
Chris, could I add something there?
Sure.
This article, which you hadn't seen before, but is from Springfield newspaper, and there were editorials in the Springfield newspapers criticizing Yellow Springs for being resistant to integration of the schools in 1887. And here you notice the headlines. It says the schools of Yellow Springs have been closed for nearly 2 weeks. It seems that they now have equal facilities because they're closed for everybody. So it was not a smooth process. And Chris's article from the Yellow Springs News is some of the positive side, but there was a lot of negative too, because the school board was very resistant to integrating the Yellow Springs schools at the time.
And there's the one first poster in the back of the room was put together by Mary Morgan, our past president. And one of the pictures shows kids at the Union Schoolhouse, but all the black kids are in the back and all the white kids are in the front. So even though it was integrated, there was still separation. In 1940s,
Whoops, sorry, this, I just put him in there. He was the principal of the high school in 1861, so we actually have a photograph of an early principal who would have been principal at the South School.
handsome fellow.
Lysander Tully, what a name.
Yeah, the names are wonderful. So in 1940 in Ohio, there was less than 900 one-room schoolhouses, whereas in 1914 there were over 10,000 one-room schoolhouses. So we're losing them. And the typical Midwestern one-room schoolhouse is the most symbolic representation of community enterprise. Its site, the construction, the use, determined by the people it served. That past is gone, but the concept that an educated population is essential ingredient for democratic government has never been stronger. And now we go to another secondary school in Yellow Springs that Peggy will talk about.
Well, I, like Chris, am not terribly comfortable speaking in front of a group, so if you'll be patient with me. I have to go back a little bit before the school I'm talking about is the Antioch School. And I want to start back in 1953 when Antioch College opened with Horace Mann as the president. He also started a preparatory school called Antioch Academy that was primarily for potential students for Antioch College who could not pass the difficult entrance examination to enter the college. The preparatory school students were integrated with the college students and lived on campus. In 1853, Judge Mills established a private school for his children and for the children of the Antioch College faculty. It was a primary school and was called Little Antioch. It was located on the triangle where the funeral home now stands. It was demolished in 1923. Little Antioch was never officially connected to Antioch College. In 1921, Arthur Morgan became president of Antioch College. At that time, the preparatory school was still in existence and connected to the college. At that point, the prep school underwent organization and became Antioch School. From 1921 to 1928, the school served students from kindergarten through high school and was located in the Mills House on the lawn behind the present elementary school. Did we have a picture, Dave, that showed the
We do, but we
that's the Mills House, and
see if it's- yeah, we may have it later on when we
Here's
talk
the
about
day.
that.
okay.
We'll get there.
And some people who went to Mills Lawn School, I think Cindy mentioned that she remembered playing on the porch of the Mills house when she was a student at the current elementary school.
Sorry, there we go. That shows Mills Lawn School in front of the Mills House.
Yeah, the Mills house is right behind that.
So it gives you an idea where
Right
it's
about
at.
where it says Mills.
Right there.
Yeah, right there, yeah. The prep school, Antioch Academy, officially closed in 1928, and high school students went to the new Yellow Springs High School, which is the Bryan Center. And the prep school remained for the elementary school kids, remained at Mills House, enrolling students from kindergarten up until high school. It stayed there until 1950 when it moved to the current location on Corey Street. In 1926, Arthur Morgan wanted to start a nursery school primarily for the faculty children. He asked Jane Cape to spearhead the project. In the fall of 1926, she started the nursery school, the first nursery school in Ohio, depending on who you ask. Antioch and Ohio State each started nursery schools in 1926, and there was a debate as to which started first. Scott Sanders tells us that Antioch was first. Jane Cape opened the school on a budget of $25. She scrounged supplies from what she referred to as barns and basements. It was officially under the Antioch College Department of Home Economics, and in 1957 it was transferred to the Education Department. And that's a picture of Day House.
Where was it?
Day House was on the north side of North College Street.
East North College.
It originally,
It's not there anymore.
No, right.
the nursery school was originally housed in King House, which is where Sam and Eddie's bookstore is now. And that was until 1928 when it moved to Day House. Day House is on the north side of East North College Street and was torn down in 1993. In 1960, the nursery school moved to G. Stanley Hall. And everybody thinks you're making a mistake when you say that, but the name of the person that the building was named for was G. Stanley Hall. And that's where the education department was located. In the late 1970s, it moved to the current Antioch School building. A point of interest, G. Stanley Hall was demolished in 2008, and at that time it was the oldest building on the Antioch campus. Did we see the Antioch School, Dave? There's the Antioch School. Okay, between 1969 and 1979, when lots of colleges and universities were eliminating their demonstration schools, Antioch College began the process of separating Antioch School from Antioch College. During this process, the subsidies for the school began decreasing, and school faculty were no longer also college faculty. In approximately 1980, final subsidies were paid to the Antioch School. In 1983, Antioch School began negotiating the purchase of the school from the college. In 1991, after an 8-year fundraising campaign, the Antioch School made the final payment to Antioch College for the purchase of the building and grounds and became totally separated from college. Antioch School continues operating today, committed to individualized learning and helping each child become the best person he or she can be. They serve children from nursery school through the 6th grade. I was the administrator of the Antioch School from 1982 to 1992.
We're going to back up a little bit and go back to the Union School, Union Schoolhouse. I'm going to just very briefly, it's an historical high point. In 1847, there was what was called the Akron Act here in Ohio. And it was legislation that set aside three important things. It was that they incorporate the township into the town into a single school district with taxes to support free schools for all youth. Also, that they would elect a six-member board of education that would manage that school and make graded schools free to all with qualifying exams, and then for those beyond primary grades. The book that David mentioned earlier is over on the counter back here, and it's pretty incredible because you go through there and there's everything in there from the windows, how to set the windows, where they should be, down to how the buildings were heated, where the privies were to be situated. This is a pretty fascinating book, but what it was the union concept. In other words, there was set designs that you could have for schools depending on how many children you were going to serve. There were also similar ones if you look at the Carnegie libraries, for example. It was also, there was set standard architectural models that you could pick from depending on how large a library you needed. In 1853, Henry Bernard's book there on school architecture was made available so that anybody that wanted to go ahead and do their own school system could have the benefit of those plans. The union schools, which is, and I still haven't figured out where the term union schools comes from, but union schools consisted of 2, 3, 4, and 5 graded classes. Villages commonly had 2 or 3 departments. This one in here in Yellow Springs that we use even today, is still in existence today, had 8 classrooms. It had what was called a raised basement. If you look at the foundation, you can see the windows in the foundation so that the space in the basement could be used for classroom. I was fortunate enough to attend kindergarten, 7th and 8th grade in this building. Where's Susan?
I went to kindergarten.
You went to kindergarten there, and did you go to, okay, did you go through, what other grades?
I think through 3rd grade.
3rd grade.
I went kindergarten through 5.
Through grade 5. And then you moved from...
To the first year at the New Mills Lawn School.
Okay, because I talked to Rodney Bean too, and he said he went 1st through 6th at Antioch School, 7th grade at Mills Lawn, and then down to Bryan High School.
We started switching stuff around.
Yeah.
So many kids.
Well, yeah, we had a good, I digress, but kindergarten here, and then grade school through 6th grade at Mills Lawn, 7th and 8th grade at Union Schoolhouse, and then 9th and 10th at John Bryan, and 11th and 12th graduated from the new high school, which is up on East Eden
Of course,
Road.
in my day, 7th through 12 was down at Bryan.
There you go. So they shifted us around. Yellow Springs built this Union Schoolhouse in 1873 to include primary through high school classes. The building had a raised basement, as I said, with classroom space on the east side of the building in the basement. The left side was probably primarily furnace room and toilets and that kind of stuff, when they had toilets inside. I haven't figured out where the outhouses were on this property, but they had to be somewhere.
Can you see them in the background there, maybe?
Possibly, yes, or a coal shed, I don't know. What's also interesting is we have Union Street runs what is behind this building now. If you go in it today, it's pretty compartmentalized, but the main staircase enters down the back of the building, not at the front here. So when you go in the front, you go into a hallway that takes you back to the main stairway, which went on the 2nd floor. Also, what's not shown in this picture, the fire escapes. There were doors on either side on the 2nd floor. Fire escapes ran the width of it and then came down both ways. So that's how we entered the building in junior high, because downstairs they had village offices, police department, and mayor's court was all downstairs at the time. Also, we only used half the upstairs of the building. There was an apartment on the north, the northeast corner of the building was made into an apartment for one of the police officers. No, but it was interesting. If you had a seat at the outside of the room, in the wintertime you wore a coat all the time. If you sat in the middle of the room, you didn't have to wear your coat all the time because it was warm enough. They had ceiling hung furnaces that when they ran, you couldn't hear the teacher talking. And the best one, and Becky will help me with this one, the police department was in the downstairs up on the the bell tower, they had the sirens for the volunteer fire department. So if they dropped a tone for the volunteer fire department, the sirens would go off. But they also set the sirens off every day at noon. So if you were sitting in the classroom and it was noon and that siren would start, there would be this low frequency vibration. And then you could start, so we all knew when lunchtime was. Anyway.
It was terrifying going up and down those fire escapes in the winter.
Gee, my experience is totally different. We love the fire escapes, tearing up and down.
Right, yes, exactly.
And I don't remember the fire alarm in the building, it was elsewhere. And all downstairs and upstairs were all classrooms. And if you want to ask me later, I'll tell you what my boyfriend remembers. Burl Ives coming to sing there. And
Now, when you were going there, did you go to the field next door for sort of the recreation?
no, all around the school was recreation. Swings and playthings and
It
all
was,
that.
it was an interesting experience. This was used until construction of the high school in 1927, I believe. John Bryan High School?
28.
28, thank you. So there were still classes going here, then you went down to the high school at John Bryan. Then in 1952, with the opening of Mills Lawn, they started cutting back on the use of this as classroom space. We were in this building from what, 1959, 1963. When Yellow Springs High School was opened in 1963, the junior high classes then moved down to John Bryan High School, the old John Bryan High School at the bottom of Dayton Street. So that's pretty much it on the Union Schoolhouse. There was mention of the Confer School, which was out on the corner of East Enon Road and Fairfield Pike. Properties now where Dr. Stockwell lives, the house with all the wind generators and stuff. I visited with them and went out and we found the foundation. It's in the woods right off East Enon Road. It was blown down in 1878, I think, in a windstorm. So all that exists now is the foundations and where the privies were. But that was the Confer School out that way.
David, you told me that, I think you told us that there was a gym in the Union School at one time.
It was my understanding that the second floor, would be the second floor north side of the Union Schoolhouse was an auditorium. It had 16-foot ceilings in there, and that there was enough space that they could open it up and play basketball.
And this is
And they had dances there too.
I spoke to somebody who said he had played there.
Yes.
He was born in 1914, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah, Western Hamilton played basketball.
He was out on Hill Road, and I'm not sure. One time he went to Searville, and I'm not sure. I think he went both places. I'm not sure who he was playing for at the time, but.
And this is the I don't remember now, 1907 or 1908 Yellow Springs High School girls basketball team.
Right. And interestingly enough, and I don't know whether we have a picture or not, there's a Union Schoolhouse in Clifton.
Right.
And it's right downtown Clifton, and it's been restored. So I don't know where the kids where the kids came from to populate that space, but it's still standing, and it's a very similar structure. So, any questions or anything about this one?
Well, just want to say that
Yes.
Susie Dykstra Bockwell's mother played basketball.
There you go.
And there's a picture of her in one of the yearbooks.
She's back here on the panel, pardon me, pointing in the bottom right-hand corner. There's a picture of her and her team out on the steps in front of the Union Schoolhouse.
Yeah. We also called it the Dayton Street School. Never
Dayton
called
Street School, right.
In my area, in my town.
Got it? That's what we call it too.
So that now brings us to John Bryan and his donation of the 14 acres that run along the Yellow Springs Creek for a high school, but under 3 conditions. That no one be barred due to color, there be no basement, and no religion was to be taught in that school. Due to World War I, he donated the property, or there was much discussion with the school board as to whether to accept the donation. Construction was delayed because of World War I. So 1928 is the first graduating class. In 1940, there was a school addition added.
Do you know why the condition of no basement?
I would assume rock bed, maybe too hard of a rock bed, or maybe too much water. Don't know. Water. So this is the John Bryan School in, would have been 1928 was when it was built. And the first graduating class of 1928. Handsome group. And another later picture, you can tell by the dress styles.
Hey, that's Vanguard, isn't it? Oh, no. I'm sorry.
So we're going to backtrack a bit and look at the map of 1902 and see that this is where John Bryan property was. This would be Route 68. Yeah, no, that's David Street, right?
No.
And then this would be Route 68. And then cemeteries were located over here. So there is a sequence of events, and I leave it to you, the listeners, to see whether they're connected or not. This would be, wow, look at the, is that a log there, or? So this would be the old Springfield Pike?
Yeah, and that's the Yellow Springs
Okay.
house, which had burnt in 1902. It had been one of the original resort hotels. It burnt, and then John Bryan ended up buying the property with the burnt hotel on it, and ended up giving it to the school district. But there was one building that had survived that fire, and that was right above the creek, these cottages.
So the cottages were used more like a boarding house for local workers. In this story takes place in September 1915. There were two families that were living there. One was a gentleman called Denman Duncan, who had a bit of a drug habit. He was the son of a professor, and he studied plants in the Glen. He taught some of his father's classes on plant physiology, and between times he read a lot of books. Another couple that lived there was Lewis Haynes and his wife. Lewis worked at the Carr's nursery. Mrs. Haynes was somewhat of a, they considered her more of a child than a grown woman. She always looked upon her husband with certain awe as a child regards his father. But when Denman Duncan became a neighbor, she transferred her feelings to this educated naturalist. One night she told her husband excitedly, "What do you think? Mr. Duncan has found many different ferns in the Glen. That fellow wouldn't know a fern if he saw one." "Oh, but he read all about them in the books." "Bookman, huh? I guess I work with ferns, don't I?"
Oh, yeah, right.
"Skunk cabbage is all that man knows." Well, another night, his wife had more news. "I can't wait to tell you. Mr. Duncan has found a walking fern." "A what?" "A walking fern." But he couldn't stand it anymore. He got up and walked over to Denman's, or Mr. Duncan's house and was going to complain, and then realized that yes, indeed, he was more educated, probably knew a lot more about ferns, and left without saying much. But Mr. Duncan was kind of worried about the visit. He says, "Well, that fellow acted like he was jealous. That would never do." So the following day, again, the wife starts, "Oh, Lou, I must tell you the most wonderful thing. Mr. Duncan has found a new fern, one that shines at night like a fire." "Foxfire." No, a real fern." Haynes got up from the table and went out again. But this time he had a hatchet in his hand. Duncan was sitting by a lamp reading, and like an Indian with a tomahawk, Haynes sunk the hatchet into Duncan's skull. As you stand at the Springfield Road and look down the creek, you might see an occasional gleam of light from Duncan's phosphorescent ferns. This is from this book. We have it for sale at the desk. So the following year, in 1916, Brian donated the property. Is there a connection?
And here's that location today. This is a WPA-funded amphitheater that was built as part of the first round of funding by the WPA.
Class.
Really? Wow. I'm going to talk a little bit about Mills Lawn School, but it's actually more about the background before the school was built. Mills Lawn is the public elementary school which opened in 1953, and there was an addition added in 1956. The land that the school was built on, that's Mills Lawn itself, was given to the Board of Education by Antioch College in 1949, but there's quite a story behind that gift. This is the story of pistol packing Pearl, which I'm telling you with thanks to Scott Sanders, the archivist for Antiochiana, where we heard the story. According to deed and tax records, the original home on this property was built by William Mills around 1843. And the grounds of the residence, Mills Lawn as it is now, was filled with pathways and gardens, and members of the public were welcome to walk through this park. And the design of the new Mills Park Hotel across the street was inspired by the original Mills house. In 1866, William Means, a successful businessman in the iron and coal industry, purchased the property and lived in the home with his wife Martha and their 3 daughters. Prior to William's death in 1921, his daughter Gertrude and her husband had sold the property to Antioch College, with the stipulation that William and another of his daughters, called Pearl, could live in the property for the remainder of William's life. When her father died, Pearl was unable to bring herself to leave the property that had been her family's home for over 50 years. The headline of a local newspaper reported, "Woman loses battle to retain home. With pets, she faces a cheerless future." This then becomes a story of pistol packing Pearl, as Scott Sanders called her. A year after her father's death, Pearl still refused to leave her family home. Now, Antioch College owns the property now. After repeated requests and offers of assistance to move Pearl from the house, Antioch College was forced to take legal action. Pearl was taken to court, where she did not deny that she no longer had the right to the property, but she still refused to leave. A constable was sent to serve her with official papers to vacate the property, and Pearl met him on the porch with a shotgun. The constable left, but later returned with sheriff's deputies who physically removed Pearl from the house. She was briefly retained in the county jail. Later, Pearl and her dog stayed with a friend at the Little Antioch school. Her cat, however, still refused to leave the old family home and continued to live on the porch. Pearl went there daily to feed her cat. Well, once Pearl was no longer living in the house, Antioch College could make the necessary renovations to the property, and the house served as a dormitory for Antioch College between 1922 and 1948. In 1949, Antioch College gave the deed for Mills Lawn to the Yellow Springs School Board, and in 1953, the Mills Lawn School opened. And the old Mills house itself, Pearl's home, was not torn down until 1966.
And you can see it, Jillian, in the back.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's the one that was over there. Yeah, that's great. The Mills Lawn School is still on its original site. Currently, it has 378 students with a minority enrollment of 35%. It has small classes with approximately 16 students per teacher. Mills Lawn Elementary School, McKinney Middle School, and the Yellow Springs High School have all been recognized by the U.S. Department of Education as National Blue Ribbon School of Excellence.
Well, this is our current Yellow Springs High School. It's located on East Eden Road, and it was completed in 1963. The first class to graduate was in 1964, and the grades 9 through 12. So who here was in the first graduating class? One person? Okay. It was built with a capacity of about 450 students, and the enrollment in 1963-64 was 300 students. The first principal of the school was John Malone. One of the interesting or unique architectural features of the school's design was the large, it was 3 stories on the main part of the building, or is, and it had a cement block, decorative block screen. And then I think it was in about the late 90s that the block screen was removed because we had a lot of bird problems with nesting. So the other interesting architectural feature, I think, of that particular design in the 60s was the music room. And it was a 12-sided angled room. And I know that when I was in school, we used to call it the spaceship. I have yearbooks that are of 1968 and 71 back there for people to look at to see share some of their memories. And I open it up to people that if you had memories of going to school then, to share them right now. That's it.
There's a photo of it.
Yep.
It must have been right about opening.
That was 1968, that picture was taken. And it kind of shows the screen, the cement block screen that was removed.
That cement block screen, the birds loved to roost in it, and it was so noisy. And of course, also there was stuff dribbled down everybody else.
I'm Becky Campbell, and I have the honor of doing the youngest school in town. And of course, the youngest school is also officially was the Arthur P. Morgan Middle School, and it opened on December 1970. The building was a new concept in school design. The basis for the building design was requested to better facilitate the individual guided education program being followed by the Yellow Springs schools. The building was built near the high school. The middle school housed the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. The building had a small gym, few office cubicles, and large open areas without walls for instructional space. At that time in 1970, the school district had approximately 1,000 students, 240 of which were assigned to the middle school. Space was hard to come by, so opening of the middle school was a much appreciated and relieved the crowding. Less than 5 years later, on the supervisor's evaluation, said that the facilities at the middle school have not reached expectations for many years, 5 years. So programs were changed, student grouping was changed, but individual instruction was preserved. Then the census was 222 in 1976. Parents and teachers needed more changes. Main desire was to put forth this need for walls to help solve the discipline, the order, and the distracted students. Parent survey felt that the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade being grouped together for instruction should be separated into the 6th being alone and the 7th and 8th still combined, to reduce the bullying and the planned activities more appropriate for an age group. In 1977, when the high school hamburgers were 75 cents and 80 cents with cheese, the new walls were installed at Morgan. And almost immediately it was quieter, students were more studious, behavior improved, bullying decreased, and hazing of the 6th grade students was reduced. Apparently they picked on the 6th grade. And again, funds were getting low. Morgan Middle roof needed extensive repair, so belt tightening started again, and the census was down another 45 students, district-wide. That is, the walls helped, but complaints continued. The district was in trouble with census, and the town and the school census was decreasing. In 1988, the structural problems, the student population diminishing, the decision to vacate the building was made. At that time, there were 770 total students in the school system. The decision in 1988 was made to transfer the 7th and 8th students to the newly placed accessory trailers, sometimes known as shoebox, and nicknamed shoebox. The move also changed the school name from Morgan to McKinney, and the 6th grade was moved to Mills Lawn. The McKinney shoeboxes were bricked in 2002. The building, after they moved out, the building was leased on a 10-year lease to the Greene County Board of Education and houses a variety of school support services, including special ed programs for children with behavioral handicap and the Miami Valley Ed Computer Association. At some point after the 10-year lease expired, the facilities were purchased and today is called Greene County Educational Service Center. And that's the story of Mills Lawn, or Morgan Middle. And it was open for 18 years totally. So, and it's the youngest school building in our system. Okay? And that's it, short, done. So I hope you have lots of questions for David. David?
I want to thank all the board members for pitching in on that program. I thought it was a great overview. Anybody have any stories they want to tell? Questions they have? Comments to make? If not, we can...
I've got a little thing. I
Sure.
brought some yearbooks aside from the ones that are on the table for Brian. So you can always ask me, what years do you have? You might find a grandfather in there.
And
Oh, and an Antioch School book, you know, where you put your poems and short stories for the Antioch School kids. I brought one of those books too.
So we've got displays you can look at. We've got refreshments.
Yeah, I have another school I can talk about, which I went to. It was the Vale School. And it was more or less of a neighborhood school. And the Vale is south of town about a mile. And there was a neighborhood there, which is a community actually. And there, in that, the area I grew grew up, there were a lot of kids, and I think there were maybe 30, 35, maybe even 40 kids from that kind of generation over maybe a period of 10 or 12 years. And then after that, the Vail School only went through 3rd grade, so I went into the public schools after that. But there also were a few other kids that would come to the Vail School that tended to be kids that just somehow didn't fit in at the Antioch School, let alone the public school.
Was there a building, or was it held at
There,
people's houses?
it was kind of a hybrid of homeschooling, I'd say. There was a building that was for the school, which is now part of a residence in the Vail. And it wasn't an elaborate building, it was just thin walls. Didn't seem like there was much insulation or anything in there. There was a sink, I don't remember a bathroom in there. What we did about that. We would gather there, sometimes have classes in there, but a lot of instruction would be at various people's houses, which it was mostly the moms of the neighborhood that would teach
I never heard of that before.
writing or arithmetic, or a couple of dads participated every now and then. Have activity time, go around various places. And I don't remember exactly how long it continued on, but it did continue on. My mother taught there for a long time. The population was down. There were some more, pardon?
Valeska Appleberry had
She had a different school, yeah. Valeska was one of our teachers in the Vail School, and she later started a Montessori school, and she built a small building for that. It was different, yeah.
Carl, do you know, this was all before your time, did they run into problems with the state authorities about not being sufficient? Or what I remember, and I never quite understood it, but like when I was at the Antioch School, John Eastman transferred in.
My oldest son went there through
I-
3rd grade.
Yeah.
And then
I can tell you-
transferred to Millville.
Peggy?
I can tell you a little bit about that, because when I was director of the Antioch School, we looked at different state organization or state certifications that we could possibly get involved with if we wanted to. And what I found out is that the superintendent of each school district is responsible for the educating of children within that district. If there is a school there that the superintendent feels is not adequate and is not educating the children, if he complains or she complains about it, then the state would come in and look and see if they need to make them be certified in a certain way. As long as the superintendent in that district is pleased with what's going on, the state does not step in. Now, that was, 20 years ago, so I don't know about today. But,
Maybe something, and I don't believe any of the people who taught us were certified teachers, but I don't remember any complaints about it either. Also then, when I did go to Mills Lawn in the 4th grade, it must have been right before the new high school, then, time the new high school was completed. Because Mills Lawn was getting pretty full then, and there were classes, I think maybe there were some 3rd grade classes, I don't remember, but that were being taught in the Presbyterian church across the street in their annex. And I never had a class over there, but some students were over there. Do you remember anything about that, Cindy?
I remember it, but I was never there.
Yeah.
I just knew that that happened.
Mhm. I had thought maybe that some classes were being taught in the Mills house at some point, but by the time I came to 4th grade there, I think.
My sister went to 7th grade in those houses.
Okay, and the Mills house had been condemned by the time I was there.
Thanks, Carl. That whole story about the Vail School, we need to get into our records.
Yeah,
Guys?
maybe I could talk to my mom about it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So in my family, we were always told that our house was a school house on the corner of Phillips and Limestone. And when did the,
Looks like.
took off the wallpaper, you could see the blackboards in the living room.
Are you, where are you on that corner?
On the stucco,
The stucco kind of
Well, it looks like a
where the
schoolhouse.
dentist.
right.
Okay, I always thought the dentist's house was the school because it looked like it, like this one room school.
But they always said ours was, and
And they
even
found blackboards.
when we sold it, the Hermans took off the wallpaper and could still see it. And that was just in the last 8 years.
Chris, you didn't come up with anything in your research about that, right? It does, it looks like a schoolhouse. I mean, we'll have to do some more digging, because if there were blackboards in it, that's a pretty good sign that it wasn't, and it certainly looks like it.
Our oldest son went to the Vale School, and Mary Morgan, Ross Morgan's wife, taught there, along with his mother, Peggy Champney. And they were the ones that were teaching down there. And you would volunteer to go and help and take the kids on field trips and stuff like that.
That's interesting.
So he went there because he didn't really fit into the elementary school when we came here. So he was at the Vale.
Anybody else want to add something?
Yeah, just that little story of my boyfriend's that I wanted to tell. Not only does he remember going up on the second floor of the Dayton Street School for a program that was put on, probably in the gym. That program had Burl Ives singing folk songs. So Burl Ives came to Yellow Springs. Besides going to Antioch, he came to the grade school and sang for the kids. The other thing Petey remembers is a magician, a trickster type of entertainer came and brought his pony with him, came up the steps and went up to that same room and gave a performance with his pony doing tricks, which I thought was delightful. There was a little carnival that was put on in the backyard. I remember standing in line, and also that you could stand in line to not just for pony rides, but to win a pony. And I stood in line and I let my girlfriend, Persis Mercer, in ahead of me. She won the pony. I didn't mind because I had a pony, lucky me. So, it didn't hurt me at all. I was happy for her. But
David, you had a story about watching them tear down the Opera House.
The opera, seventh grade, Jeb Bush and I slipped away. Red Lewis was tearing down the Opera House. We snuck off and went over and stood on the corner there of Winter Street and Dayton Street.
David,
Yes,
stand up and talk.
sorry. We seventh grade, we snuck away when they were tearing down the Opera House.
This was at the Union Schoolhouse.
Yeah, we were going seventh grade at Union Schoolhouse. We slipped away, and they were, got the crane and the wrecking ball, and they're smashing this building. We're standing on the other side of the street watching, and we lost track of time, of course, and next thing we knew, there was Mr. Funderburg standing there with his hand on our shoulder. And he stood there with us for 20 minutes. Did not say a word watching this building come down. And finally he says, "Boys," he says, "time to go back to school." He never said a word to us about, walking off school grounds or anything.
Is that Bob Thunderberg?
Yes, but I'm sure he had a lot of memories of that building when it was in use as an opera house. That's another, we could do research on.
The Opera House, sure.
oh yeah, talked to Tony Dallas because his dad did performances and put on
Well,
plays there.
we appreciate everybody coming. Take a look at the displays and have some refreshments. Thanks a lot.